Hi, this is Andrea Kane, and I'm here with you for HSC 114 Medical Terminology. We are studying the Language of Medicine, 12th edition by Davy Allen Chabner. And this is Chapter 2, Terms Pertaining to the Body as a Whole. We have some chapter goals. We are going to look at specifically the structural organization of the body cavities and the organs that they contain, the anatomical and clinical divisions of the abdomen, and the anatomical divisions of the back. We're going to look at the terms that describe positions, directions, and planes of the body and identify meanings for new word elements and use them to understand medical terms. This is really important. This is a very important chapter because a lot of these concepts will come back in subsequent chapters, so it's really important that you spend some time on chapter 2 and master its information. We have the same unit objectives as before for chapter 1. That's 9.1.1 through 9.1.3. If you'd like to follow along in your book, I'm on page 32. And I think this is kind of repetitive because we just talked about these things. So let's move on here to cells, tissues, organs, and systems. If you look at your book, there's some really good visuals in your book. The first one is on here on page 32, where it talks about cells and the different parts of cells, and it challenges you to go ahead and fill those in based on the information in the book, and I would encourage you to do that. So cells are the fundamental unit of all living things. They are everywhere in the human body. Every tissue, every organ is made up of these individual cells. So that is the basic building block, cells. And we'll talk about many things on the cellular level. The next part is tissues. Cells come together and they make up tissues. And it talks about this on page 36 in your book. And you can see that tissues are a group of similar cells that work together to do a specific job. So cells build together to do a specific job, and that becomes tissues. And it'll talk about these different types of tissues there on pages 36 and 37. On page 38, it talks about organs, how these different types of tissue then combine to form an organ. And it gives us the example of the stomach, that it's composed of muscle tissue, nerve tissue, and glandular epithelial tissue. And the medical term for internal organs is viscera. These organs work together to perform complex functions, and that's then a system. So you have your cells, which are your basic building block. Those come together to do a specific job, and that's called tissue. Tissue then combines to form an organ, and organs work together to perform complex functions, and those are called systems. So that's how it all builds. And I really like figure 2-7 on page 39 because it shows you that progression. So we talked a little bit about how they are the unit of the fundamental unit. There are major parts of a cell. Those include the chromosomes, nucleus, cell membrane, cytoplasm, mitochondria, and endoplasmic reticulum. And this gives us the visual for that. So this would help you fill in that figure, what's it listed as? Figure 2.1 on page 32. So you may want to click on this PowerPoint as you are working to fill in that information and become familiar with it. Then it talks about things like anabolism, catabolism, cell membranes, chromosomes, cytoplasm, DNA, endoplasmic reticulum, genes, karyotype or karyotyping, metabolism, mitochondria, and nucleus. This is a study section on page 35, and it goes through and it gives you all of the definitions for that. So it encourages you to practice spelling each term and know its meaning. That is very good information because you will have this again on your quiz. Hint, hint, hint. So make sure you study section 1 on page 35. So these cells are specialized to carry out individual functions. There are types of cells like muscle cells, nerve cells, epithelial cells, and fat cells. And you'll see these on the top of page 36 in your book. And this is a visual as to what they look like. I mean, not exactly, but in general, these are some examples. And then we talked about tissues and organs and systems and how those all build together. And here's that visual that I really liked on page 39, figure 2.2-7. So now let's move on and oh, at the bottom of page 39, before we move on, sorry about that, I get a little excited. I really enjoy this class. This is one of the interesting ones, I think, that is fun to teach and fun to learn because there's so much to it. But anyway, not to get on a soapbox. On the bottom of page 39 is study section number 2. And again, hint, 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 you will want to know all of this information because you will be challenged with it on a quiz this week. Make sure that you practice spelling each term and know its meaning. Again, flashcards or Quizlet will become very good friends of yours. At least my students have said that is one of the biggest things that helped them was doing flashcards or using Quizlet for all of the terms, not just the study sections. So moving on to body cavities, we're now on page 40 in your book. These are the spaces within the body that have internal organs, the viscera. There are 4 main body cavities that we're going to talk about. There's the cranial, which has the brain and the pituitary gland. Those are the 2 major organs. The thoracic, which has the lungs, heart, esophagus, trachea, bronchial tubes, thymus gland, aorta, and large artery. And then you have the abdominal cavity. And sometimes they put that together with the pelvic cavity. Some people say that the abdominal is separate from the pelvic. Some people put them together. They're divided by the diaphragm, but essentially if you say abdominal pelvic, it's both, and it does include that diaphragm in the middle. And then, of course, there's the spinal cavity, which has all the nerves of the spinal cord. And again, the information for all of this is on pages 40 and 41. There are figures here. In fact, this is figure 2-8. They ask you to fill it in your book, and so here are all the answers. But you can see the different cavities. Okay, so we start at the top. We've got the cranial. Here in the back, we've got the spinal running all along here, along the backbones, the vertebrae. And then you've got your thoracic up here. This is where your lungs are, the diaphragm, and then you've got your abdominal pelvic. And there's really not much of a dividing point between the abdominal and pelvic. The diaphragm does divide the thoracic, but I think this is part of the reason why so many times this is considered all together. But if you pull them apart, the pelvic does have portions of the small and large intestines, but it's really mostly rectum, urinary bladder, urethra, and uterus and vagina in the female. And the abdominal cavity is pretty much the intestines. It has the stomach, the intestines, the spleen, the pancreas, the liver, and the gallbladder. So it's good for you to know what those are, as well as what they contain. One other thing I want to point out here is these words, ventral and dorsal. Ventral is going to be front, dorsal is going to be back. And make sure that you're aware of those. And you will have those here in this chapter. You'll talk about those when we talk about the different planes of the body and that sort of thing. But make sure you know the ventral cavities are thoracic, abdominal, pelvic. The dorsal are the cranial and spinal. And we kind of talked through this already, so I'm not going to go over it again. But if you want to look at pages 40 and 41, it goes into some detail here. Pop quiz. Which body cavity contains the pleural cavity and the mediastinum? Well, we kind of talked about this a little bit, but I would like to encourage you to think when you see the word plural, think lungs, think breathing. So this may help you with what is below. All right, which body cavity contains the peritoneum? Peritoneum. Well, you don't have one in your, I'm sorry, my mouse is a little bit active here. You don't have a peritoneum in the spinal cavity, and you definitely don't have it in the brain cavity. So you'll have to kind of think about what the peritoneum does and where it's at. And I will give you a hint. It is not thoracic. All right, so what are the organs of the abdominal, pelvic, and thoracic cavities? And it just goes through and lists these out for you. And there are some, again, good visuals on pages 42 and 43 that show you this. In fact, here's figure 2-10 from page 42 that goes through all of those organs that are in the abdominal, pelvic, and thoracic cavities. And then you have study section 3, and that is on page 45. Again, you need to know those terms, both the spelling and the meaning. And then it talks about the abdominal pelvic regions. This is now on page 46 in your book, and there are 9 regions. Think of sort of, if you're going to play tic-tac-toe, and you laid out a tic-tac-toe board, but you did it on someone's abdominal pelvic region. This is what it would look like, and these are what the regions are. And notice that they go right, left, center as they number. Right, left, center. Right, left, center. Right, left, center. So make sure that you are aware of how that numbering goes, what each one of these are, how they're laid out, and what the organs are in each one. You really need to memorize this because it will make sense later when we start talking about other things and we get into the individual body systems. And this just goes through and tells you what is there. And again, this is on pages 46, 47 in your book. Quadrants. Now, quadrants are 4. When you see quad, you want to think 4, the word 4. So instead of a tic-tac-toe board with 9 locations, this is 4 only. You have your right upper quadrant, your left upper quadrant, your right lower quadrant, and your left lower quadrant. And this is helpful to doctors when they're doing physical exams. For example, you can see down here, this is your appendix right here in your right lower quadrant, your RLQ. If someone comes in and they're complaining of that right lower quadrant pain, they've got nausea, they've got vomiting, they might be starting to run a fever, appendicitis is often suspected because of where the pain is. So that is helpful to doctors to be able to know what quadrant it is. And also when you're talking about some radiology exams, sometimes with contrast and those types of things. Positions, directions, planes, and terminology. This is on page 50 of your book. And I'm thinking that slide is a bit out of order. I apologize for that. I'll come back to that. Let me move to the divisions of the back. This is on page 48 in your book. And you have 5 divisions in your back. You have cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal. Those are your anatomical divisions of the back. And this is a visual. It's figure 2-16 in your book on page 48, and it shows you where these divisions are. You have 7 bones in your cervical division in your back. You have 12 in your thoracic division. You have 5 in your lumbar, and then your sacrum or your sacral area is 1 bone, considered 1 bone. And your coccygeal area is considered 1 bone. So make sure you know this inside, outside, upside down, because you'll need to remember it. So you have your abdominal pelvic regions, you have your abdominal pelvic quadrants, and this is study section 4, and that is on page 49. Please, please study this information. You will need it when it comes time for your quiz. All right, so we talked about those, all those different things that are in that study section. Quick quiz. What is the abdominal pelvic region that is located in the central region near the navel? Near the navel. Think belly button. And that should help you, hint, 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 find the right one. All right, so, oops, I guess we had another one there. Name the abdominal pelvic region that is located in the lower middle below that umbilical region. Below. I'm going to let you figure that one out. All right, so positional and directional terms of the body, page 50 and the figures on page 51. They want you to fill in these positions and directions. And they're really exactly as they're laid out in the book. So just fill those in and become very familiar with them because you are going to need to know these terms. No matter what part of medicine you end up going in, positional and directional terms are really important, specifically and especially if you go into radiology. Then it will become crucial. But even not in radiology, these are terms that you need to know. And I will encourage all of those of you who are in health information technology or intending to go into that program, you will need these for coding. So trust me, you need to know these as well. So planes of the body. This is on page 52. You have a frontal, also known as coronal, a sagittal, also known as lateral, and transverse, which is also known as cross-sectional or axial. You need to know all of these names and titles. This is a figure. It is figure 2-18 on page 52 in your book, and it kind of shows you how it's laid out. So if you look at the green one first, that is your frontal or coronal plane. It marks you from front versus back. The blue one, which goes right through the middle of the body, is your sagittal plane, and that marks you as left or right. That's where it gets into the laterality. The pink one is the third one, and that is called transverse, and it basically cuts someone in half. They have a top and a bottom, and that's also known as axial. So study section 5 on page 53, again, gives you those terms. You need to know how to spell them and know their meaning. And now we're on to combining forms. We have abdominal, which means abdomen, adipo, fat, antero, front, cervico, which means neck, and cervico can get a little bit confusing at times because it means the neck of the body, such as the cervical spine, or it can mean the neck of the uterus, the cervix. So you kind of have to watch the context of what's being used. Chondro, cartilage, chromo, color, coccygo is coccyx. And I'm going to give you a hint right here. Whenever you see this YG combination, it's going to turn into YX. For whatever reason, instead of using the X in the combining form, they change it to G. Not sure why, it's just the way that they do. So you'll see that again. But watch out for that double CYG. That's a bit of an unusual spelling, isn't it? Cranio, skull, cyto, cell, disto, far, distant, dorso, back portion of the body. Histo, histio. Ooh, watch out for that. They're very close, but one adds an I. They both mean tissue. Ilio, ilium of the hip bone. Remember that. I-L-I-O is ilium of the hip bone. Inguino, groin, cario, nucleus. Latero, side, lumbo, lower back. Medio, middle, nucleo, nucleus. Pelvi, Ooh, now we get our first one where the combining form, the combining vowel is an I. So watch out for that, where that combining vowel is an I, not an O. It's pelvi, not pelvo, for pelvis. For Ringo, remember I told you to watch for that G when there's an X. If there's an X involved, it's going to flip to a G for that combining form. So you're going to want to make sure that you know the spelling here. For Ringo, for pharynx. Postero, back or behind. Proximo, nearest. Sacro, sacrum. Sarco, flesh. Spino, spine or backbone. Thelo or theleo, for nipple. Watch out for that IO. It can be THELO or THELIO. Thoraco or thoraco, it's chest. Tracheo is your trachea or windpipe. Umbilico, navel, umbilicus, also known as your belly button area. Ventro, belly side of the body. Vertebro, vertebra, vertebrae, backbones. Viscero, internal organs. Some prefixes that you need to be aware of this time around. Ana is up, kata, down. Epi, above, hypo, below. Inter, between, and intra, within. Watch out for inter and intra. Different spellings, but you've got to watch that pronunciation spelling because the meaning is different. Meta, change. Some suffixes, eel, eac, eor. O's. Look at all that. You've got four that mean pertaining to, but O's can also mean full of. Ism, process or condition. Plasm, formation. Somes or zomes, bodies. Type, picture or classification. Pop quiz, and I think this is the last slide we have for chapter 2. Which term means the process of cutting the skull? So think about skull and the process of cutting into it. And that will give you the answer. All right, that is it for chapter 2. Have a great, wonderful week. I will see you when it comes to week 2, where we will be studying chapters 3 and 4. Take care.